Hello and welcome to our first CAHRS webcast for 2025. I'm Brad Bell, the William J. Conaty Professor of Strategic Human Resources here in the ILR School at Cornell. I also serve as the Academic Director of CAHRS, our Center for Advanced Human Resource Studies. In this presentation, we'll be looking at some of the trends heading into 2025, but it might be worth taking a moment to reflect on the year that we just closed out. Certainly in 2024, we saw some trends from prior years actually flipped upside down. For a long time, we were talking about the Great Resignation and the dynamic labor market. But in fact, as we'll see in today's results, companies are starting to worry increasingly about the great stay and the fact that employees don't seem to be very mobile at all these days. We also saw other trends, such as the adoption of AI, further accelerate in 2024. Certainly, 2024 was also a year of continued uncertainty, disruption, and polarization across numerous fronts, whether economic, political, or global. Today, we'll use the results of our annual CAHRS survey to provide insight into those trends that are driving the agendas of HR leaders in the year ahead. This is our fifth year of surveying HR leaders in our CAHRS partner companies about their top priorities, which provides us an opportunity to not only examine what issues are currently front and center, but also to see how priorities have evolved over the past several years. Ultimately, our results this year reveal a number of intriguing trends. On the one hand, this year's top 5 trends are the same as last year's, although there are some differences in terms of how they rank. But as we dig into some of the sub-themes that underlie these major trends, it becomes clear that HR leaders see some new challenges as well as opportunities ahead in 2025. To provide insight into what is new this year, I'll not only share the themes and sub-themes that emerged from our survey, but I'll also share some specific quotes that the HR leaders provided to us. I hope this will help to bring the results more to life for you and also help you to think about whether these are issues that should be priorities in your own organization. Another change this year is that on each slide of the results that I'll be sharing with you, I provide a link to a related piece of CAHRS work that came out in 2024. These may be notes from one of our working groups, they may be research conducted by our faculty or students, or a recording of one of our webcasts. Hopefully these assets will be useful to you as you look to tackle some of these trends in your organizations. Before I share more about our surveys and findings, I'd like to encourage you to participate throughout today's session. You can use the chat function here in Zoom to share your thoughts or reactions to some of the trends that I share, and maybe how they line up with what you're seeing in your organization. Also encourage you to share any questions that you might have through the Q&A function in Zoom, and I hope to leave a little bit of time at the end of today's session to tackle some of your questions. I also want to note up front that at the end of today's session, we'll be sharing out a copy of today's slides as well as a recording. Hopefully those will be useful resources for you, but also encourage you to share them with others within your organization or network that may be of interest. All right, so to gain insight into the trends that are and issues that are shaping the agenda in the year ahead, we sent an end of the year pulse survey to all of our CAHRS partner companies in December of last year. We kept the survey very simple. We simply asked HR leaders to respond to a single prompt, which is, please describe the 3 to 5 HR issues that are top of mind for your organization as you look ahead to 2025. This year, 21 CAHRS companies responded and submitted a total of 89 HR issues, which we then analyzed to identify key themes as well as sub-themes. It's important to note that a number of the issues that were submitted could reasonably fall under some of the number of the different categories that I'll be discussing. So in some cases, we had to exercise some judgment about where we thought they best fit. We drew on other CAHRS research that we've been conducted to make some of these decisions. But as I go through today's presentation, I'll be highlighting where some of these judgment calls came into play. Before I get to our results, I just want to take a moment to thank all of the companies that participated in this year's survey. These companies, as you can see, span a variety of different industries, thus providing broad insight into the critical HR challenges and opportunities ahead. So before digging into the key themes that emerged from this year's survey, I thought I'd take a moment to consider and examine just how things have evolved over the 5 years now that we've been doing this survey. So quick look back. So our survey started in 2021, and not surprisingly, the focus then was really around issues surrounding the post-pandemic workforce, and workplace. DEI also emerged as a key priority in 21 in the wake of George Floyd's murder, and increased attention to DEI initiatives within organizations. While these two themes certainly dominated the results that year, other lesser priorities included talent management, transformation, as well as culture. In 2022, talent management jumped to the top of the list as companies struggled to attract and retain talent in the midst of a very dynamic labor market and the Great Resignation. Leadership development also rose up in the rankings in 22 as companies started bringing back some of their leadership development programs and sought to equip their leaders with new skills and capabilities to manage a very kind of different working environment. In addition, we saw continued focus on hybrid environment, rolling out hybrid work models and refining those models over time, and increased focus on employee activism, as well as some of the talent challenges that just mentioned really kind of focused attention on the employee experience in 2022. DEI kind of dropped down a bit on the list, but still showed up in the top 5 in 2022. So moving on to 23, talent management retained its top billing as companies continued to focus on attracting and retaining talent, but also shifted more attention into talent development and capability building. Employee experience moved up even higher on the list in 23 as companies sought to enhance their employee value proposition in part to support and align with some of these talent management efforts. Transformation reappeared in the top 5 in 23 as organizations continued to evolve their HR operating models, their company culture, as well as their hybrid work models. Appearing for the first time in our survey in 23 was total rewards, which attracted increased attention as we were experiencing increased inflation, and also concerns were emerging around potential recession or economic slowdown. Finally, leadership development and succession plan rounded out the top 5, falling a bit from 22, but still remaining a key area of focus. Last year, we saw transformation and evolution kind of leapfrog up to the top spot in our survey as companies sought to further evolve their HR operating model and respond to the steady flow of disruptions and challenges that they're facing. Talent management remained hot, particularly as companies sought to upskill and reskill their workforce in line with some of this transformation. We also saw an increased focus on technology, in particular AI, but also a kind of number of different technologies as companies were deploying technology to support some of these transformation and talent efforts. Finally, we saw employee experience and leadership development round out the top 5. So again, as I alluded to earlier, our top 5 this year is the same as last year, but again, in somewhat different order. So this year, transformation and talent management continue to be the number 1 and number 2 themes, respectively. Not really surprising, given that companies are continuing to drive transformation in their HR functions, their organizations, as well as their businesses, and are also making changes to their talent strategies to really align with and support this ongoing transformation. Leadership development and succession planning jumped up to number 3 on this year's list as companies look to develop a new cadre of leaders while also building new capabilities among their existing leaders. Employee experience stayed in that number 4 slot this year as companies focus on strengthening engagement and creating a superior experience for all of their employee segments. And rounding out this year's list is AI adoption. As I just mentioned, in prior years, we labeled this technology because respondents often reference a number of different types of technology or just spoke about kind of digital strategy more broadly. But this year, it was very clear from the responses that the focus is squarely on AI adoption, both within HR, but also within the organization and companies more broadly. This was also a place where I'll note that we had to exercise some judgment because AI was frequently referenced in a number of other responses. For example, many of the respondents, when talking about transformation, noted that their transformation efforts are really being driven by AI adoption and how that's transforming work and structures within their organization. So in some cases, we had to make a decision about whether a particular comment or issue fit more under one theme or another. So this AI adoption reference here is number 5 is really when respondents specifically talked about adopting AI within HR or within the organization more broadly and didn't reference other issues like talent or transformation. So in short, it's probably somewhat underweighted in the sense that it really did cut across a lot of these different themes this year. So overall, our analysis revealed 7 key themes, which are shown here, along with the percentage of participating companies that mentioned them at least once in their responses. And that's important to note because many times companies might have highlighted 2 or 3 issues surrounding talent or 2 issues surrounding transformation. But this is just across the companies that participated, what proportion of them indicated these themes at least once. Rounding out kind of the remainder of the themes for this year, we see DE&I showing up in the 6th spot where it was similarly last year. But as we'll talk about in a minute, the issues and concerns around DEI are certainly different this year than they were last. And last year, employee well-being was actually our 7th theme. Not a very highly mentioned theme this year. Did come up a few times, but kind of overtaking it this year was a renewed focus on performance and total rewards as companies really try to navigate value creation in a challenging environment and look to align their performance management and reward systems accordingly. It's interesting to note this year, as you kind of look at this, that there's pretty strong convergence, probably more so than in any of our previous surveys, at least along the kind of top 3 themes. We see that more than 60% of companies, in some cases 70% or more, mentioned these top 3 themes. Even employee experience, you almost see a majority of companies in our survey mentioning the employee experience. So it seems like, at least among our respondents, focusing on a pretty similar set of issues, where in the past we saw maybe 1 theme or 2 themes kind of get above a majority, but most were much more kind of divergent across different companies. And so I think overall what this suggests is that these themes are likely to be relatively robust across different industries, sizes of companies that are at different levels of stages of maturity across these various issues. And so let's delve into some of these specific themes to get a little bit more insight into kind of what HR leaders are focusing on for the year ahead. So again, our top theme was transformation and evolution. It was a prevalent theme in 21, kind of disappeared from our list in 22, and showed up as the top theme last year and earned the top spot again this year. Respondents spoke about a number of different types of transformation and also what you might think loosely around as more kind of broad evolution. HR transformation was not surprisingly the most frequently mentioned topic here. Respondents talked about transforming their HR operating model, enhancing HR functional excellence and operating efficiency, and also transforming HR work through digital and data, as you see by the representative quote here on the slide. Organizational and business transformation and HR support of those efforts was also commonly mentioned, often again, side by side with HR transformation. So respondents here talked about building and executing new business strategies, transforming their organizations in terms of structure, size, skills, and work, and also kind of just managing broad scale organizational transformation. Finally, a number of respondents talked about evolving their culture in response to things like new ways of working or other changes, such as the onboarding of a new CEO. As I mentioned earlier, at the bottom of the slide, you'll see a link to some recent research that we've done around the evolving HR business partner role, which is evolving itself in response to some of this broader HR transformation. And again, we hope that these resources will be ones that you might look into once we share a copy of the presentation with you. So talent management was, again, our second most commonly mentioned theme this year, falling only a hair behind transformation. Although companies cited a variety of different talent management priorities for 25, talent development, mobility, skills, and capabilities once again featured most prominently. This makes sense, again, because companies are looking to develop new skills and capabilities to support their transformation efforts. Workforce planning also featured prominently this year. As companies work to transform their business strategies, they'll need to plan ahead for changes in the numbers and types of employees they need to execute these changes. And finally, talent acquisition and retention featured a little bit less prominently this year than maybe in some of the past years, but was still among the most commonly mentioned talent management priorities. Interestingly, whereas in past years, the focus was largely around, how do we attract and retain and really find talent in this very challenging environment, this year, we actually saw participants, as I mentioned earlier, raising some new concerns around things like the Great Stay and what that means for talent mobility and development. And so, thinking about how some of these shifts in the labor market, both internally and externally, might impact or shape some of our talent management practices. Leadership development and succession planning was this year's third most commonly mentioned theme, up from number 5 last year. Many respondents specifically mentioned a focus on building leadership capability in 2025. For example, one respondent said they're focused on people leaders, specifically building skill, shifting mindset, holding them accountable to amplify and grow talent. Another respondent said that they're focused specifically on building rapid change capabilities among their leaders. Kind of looking beyond just development, respondents also mentioned a focus on succession and pipeline building. For example, one respondent said they're focused on really kind of moving the talent discussion from succession more to progression. How do we get people the right experiences earlier in their career? Another mentioned that they're really focused on succession for key roles across the enterprise. So not necessarily just leadership, but really looking at those key roles, critical talent throughout the organization. Again, this theme, I think tracks very closely with the kind of overarching theme around transformation. As companies transform, they'll need to focus on building new leader capabilities and ensuring succession for roles that are critical to executing the transformation. Within CAHRS, this is certainly a topic that we have focused quite a bit on in recent years. And so again, I provide a link at the bottom of this slide to the notes from one of our recent working groups on leadership development and succession planning. Employee experience was the number 2 theme in 23. It dropped down a few places to number 4 in last year's survey and kind of held constant there this year. Within this broad area of employee experience, respondents mentioned kind of several different issues. First, a number of respondents talked about how they're working towards creating a superior employee experience for all employees. And you kind of get the sense from some of the comments that we got that, maybe their efforts have been focused on certain segments of the workforce. Again, it might be critical roles, it might be more of their professional talent. And I think now the focus seems to be in 25, expanding these efforts to really cover the entire workforce. One for example, one response said in 25, they're going to evolve and improve the employee experience by leveraging data technology and collaboration tools. So part of it might also be in the how companies are thinking about going about this in 25. Given rising rates of labor action and employee activism, several respondents also spoke about continued focus on employee relations and labor relations, particularly among their frontline workforces. And finally, a number of companies mentioned that they're focused on strengthening employee engagement in 2025. These efforts, based on the comments, seem pretty targeted. For example, some respondents highlighted efforts to really increase engagement, specifically among their frontline workers or workers in specific settings like plants. Others mentioned a focus on how to sustain engagement among a more kind of distributed or decentralized workforce. So overall, what seems to be evident is that some of that work that really kind of started up a few years back around the employee experience is ongoing and is being kind of further refined in the year ahead. As I mentioned earlier, technology has been a theme that has kind of shown up in prior surveys, but this year the focus was really clearly on AI adoption and its impact. Responses in this area tended to really coalesce around two main themes. The first is the number of respondents mentioned that 25, they're really looking to help their companies accelerate the deployment of AI throughout the organization, specifically in terms of addressing issues like how AI is disrupting or changing jobs and what that means for skills and capabilities, as well as workforce planning. Second, number of respondents talked about how they're looking to further adopt AI in kind of HR and talent practices specifically. Kind of rounding out our list is DEI. So again, DEI was a very high priority in 21, kind of slipped down in our list the last few years. And as we kind of talked about in prior webcasts, kind of difficult, it was challenging to kind of figure out how to interpret some of that. Were companies kind of pulling back and maybe right-sizing some of those efforts, or was it more that now kind of DEI was seen as an embedded priority, kind of table stakes, and therefore we were kind of seeing other things showing up in our surveys? Kind of hard to tease that out in prior years. However, this year, the focus, and you might say concerns, were very clear. Respondents really highlighted how to respond and adapt in this evolving DEI landscape. None of the responses really suggested that companies are seeing DEI as any less important. And in fact, a number of them said DEI will continue to be very important going forward, but really thinking about how do we best move forward with our DEI strategy in the current environment and within the current kind of constraints and pressures that we might be facing. And some of the responses, interestingly, even highlighted how some companies are maybe starting to rethink their DEI strategy. For example, one respondent said that in 2025, they're really going to be focused on integrating equity and inclusion into the way that they work. So maybe moving away from some specific programming into more, how do we just really embed this into the fabric of the organization? And then finally, was total rewards, which was a theme that appeared back in 23, again, amongst kind of inflationary concerns, kind of dropped off the list, but showed back up this year. alongside this kind of renewed emphasis on performance and value creation. I thought the quote highlighted here really kind of captured the essence of most of the comments that we received within this theme. This respondent said that their focus is really on, how do we refresh performance and reward structures, drive greater alignment, accountability, growth, colleague retention, and business performance. A few people focused or mentioned some more specific issues around things like benefit strategy, and in particular, how to address or respond to rising healthcare costs in the US. But the general sentiment seemed to be around kind of adapting our kind of performance management and total rewards frameworks. So we're currently in the process of kind of putting together our spring calendar of events for CAHRS. And as we've done in prior years, what we'll be doing again is taking these results and using them as really a blueprint for the events and topics that we want to make sure that we cover throughout the upcoming year. I think we're already working on a number of sessions for the spring that will cover most, if not all, of the topics that kind of emerged in this year's survey, and we'll continue that work throughout the remainder of the year as well. So you'll be seeing kind of events populated here within the next week or two. So please visit our website regularly to kind of check up on what's upcoming and to learn more, as well as to register for some of those events. So I know we're almost at our time, but I would like to pause and see if there's any questions that have come in. If you have any questions, feel free to submit them. See one question here, kind of around the transformation theme, asking, specifically, what are companies doing or thinking about around their kind of HR transformation, and or how are they evolving their HR operating models? Interestingly, it seems like from the responses, as well as some of the other work that we've done here in CAHRS, our fall partner meeting and this past October featured a lot of discussion around transformation. What I would say is it seems like companies are kind of at different stages, but are really kind of focusing on four main issues. The first being around defining the kind of HR strategy and long-term plan for HR going forward, making sure that it's really aligned again with this kind of broader organizational and business transformation that's taking place. The second stage is often around building a strong foundation. So thinking around how do we redesign compensation? How do we refresh our employee value proposition, update our job architecture, revitalize culture and engagement, many of the themes that actually we saw on this year's survey. Kind of, once that foundation is placed, really kind of shifting to a focus on talent. How do we transform performance management, really build robust workforce planning processes, build leadership capability, and a strong pipeline, again, themes that we saw this year. And then finally, how do we leverage and deploy technology to increase self-service? We need to think about how implications of that for HR roles and responsibilities, and then how can we use that to drive process excellence and end user experience. So again, I think you'll see a number of events and activities that we're doing this year within CAHRS focus on that theme of transformation. So more to come. So with that, I would like to thank all of you for joining today. Really appreciate that. And again, we'll be sending you out a copy of the slides and recording from today's presentation. Would love for you to share it with others within your organization that may be interested. As always, again, please check back into our website regularly as we add more events for the spring, and hope to see you at some of those CAHRS events here in 2025. Thank you and take care.